Edgar Allan Poe, writer of stories from the mysterious to the macabre, poet, literary critic, world traveler, editor. His life was short and mostly sad, and his death remains a mystery to this day. Here are 6 things you may not know about the great and troubled Edgar Allan Poe.
Let's dig into this. Poe was born in Boston, Massachusetts on January 19th, 1809. His mother, Eliza Arnold, was from England and had been acting in America from the age of 9. His father, David Poe Jr., was also an actor, but apparently not a very good one. David and Eliza married in 1806, and their first child, William, was born in 1807. Edgar was not even 2 years old when his father abandoned pregnant Eliza in 1810. Eliza gave birth to Rosalie late that same year and continued acting.
In Richmond, Virginia, in December of 1811, Eliza died at just 23 or 24 years old, possibly of tuberculosis. Her children were split up, with William living with a family in Baltimore, Rosalie adopted by a couple in Richmond, and Edgar living with the Allan family, also in Richmond. David Poe Jr., the father that had abandoned the family, reportedly died in 1811.
Poe joined the Army after he had to leave the University of Virginia due to lack of money. He lied about his age and used the name Edgar Perry and signed on for a 5-year enlistment. He did well in the Army and was made a sergeant major in 1828. The next year, he was allowed to leave the Army after finding a substitute to complete the rest of his term. He wanted to go to West Point.
His foster father, John Allan, helped him, and on July 1st, 1830, he became a West Point cadet. It was a mistake. Maybe due partly to not getting along with his foster father, maybe because he was writing and publishing poetry and it was really his dream occupation. Poe decided he wanted out. After Mr. Allan refused permission to let him resign, he was prepared to do whatever it took, or do nothing if that's what was necessary. He refused to attend classes or formations, knowing eventually they would have to kick him out. On February 8th, 1831, he was court-martialed for gross neglect of duty and disobedience. His relationship with John Allan, rocky at best for years, was never the same.
Poe moved to Baltimore after West Point and lived with his paternal aunt, Maria Clemm, and her daughter, Virginia. Aunt Maria was poor, but supportive of his writing. He submitted a short story to a magazine contest and won the $50 first prize. In 1834, he was offered a job as the editor of the Southern Literary Messenger in Richmond. He took the job, and Aunt Maria and Virginia joined him in Richmond the following year.
Poe and Virginia were married in 1836. He was 26. She was 13. First cousins did marry in those days, so this didn't cause many waves, but the age of his wife was controversial at the time, and is controversial to this day. Poe was devoted to his wife and heartbroken when she died of tuberculosis on January 30th, 1847, at just 24 years old. Always a drinker, after Virginia's death, Poe slipped into deep depression and alcoholism.
In 1849, Poe was back in Richmond, Virginia, where he had grown up. He had a relationship with his childhood sweetheart, Elmira Royster, who had promised to marry him when he went off to college. She hadn't waited and married someone else. But in 1849, she was a widow and promised to marry Poe again. On September 27th, Poe left Richmond for Philadelphia, and we have no idea to this day where he was until October 3rd.
On that day, he was found slumped in a gutter outside a pub in Baltimore. His friend Joseph Snodgrass was called to come get him. When Snodgrass arrived, He didn't find the Poe he knew. The man he saw was disheveled and wearing cheap second-hand clothes that obviously weren't his usual dapper dress. He also appeared to be extremely drunk and delirious. Poe was taken to Washington College Hospital. He slipped in and out of consciousness until he died on October 7th.
No death certificate has ever been found. The cause of his death was officially listed as congestion of the brain, a term often used for alcoholism or alcohol poisoning. Over the years, tuberculosis, cholera, and other diseases have been put forward as possible causes for Poe's death. It has also been suggested he was tragically caught in a voter fraud scheme in Baltimore at the time called cooping, where men were drugged, kidnapped, and forced to vote over and over for a particular candidate and then left to die. The pub where he was found was a voting station.
On January 19th, 1949, the anniversary of Poe's birthday, cemetery caretakers found a bottle of cognac and 3 roses at Poe's monument in Westminster Burial Ground in Baltimore. Nearby church members said it had actually been happening for years but hadn't been noticed. It is thought that the 3 roses were for Poe, his wife Virginia, and his mother-in-law Maria, both buried at his side. Sometimes a note would also be left. No one knew if it was a man or woman sneaking into the cemetery between midnight and dawn each year. Reports said whoever it was wore a huge hat and dressed all in black, except for a white scarf. Called the toaster because some reports state he or she poured a glass of the cognac and raised it in a toast to the monument, the toaster appeared every year.
In 1976, the curator of the Poe House and Museum began to watch for the toaster and collect any notes left. In 1999, a note said the original toaster had passed away and the torch had been passed on. Witnesses after that date said the toaster appeared to be a younger person than before. There's only one photo reportedly showing the toaster, but the grainy image may be an imposter. No one bothered the toaster, even though large groups sometimes gathered to watch for. That is, until 2006, when a group tried to catch him or her. They were unsuccessful. In 2010, the toaster failed to appear. 2009 was the bicentennial of Poe's birth and the tradition that had lasted for 60 years.
And then in 2016, the Maryland Historical Society named a new, modern toaster. The toaster is anonymous and now appears during the day, wearing clothing similar to the original toaster and playing Danse Macabre on the violin.
Poe's work as a literary critic may be the reason he was thought of as a madman drunkard to this day. He was known to be depressed and drink to excess, but critics can be harsh, and Poe's reviews reportedly offended many of his contemporaries and gained him actual enemies. One man, Rufus Griswold, had been friends with Poe until his poetry was criticized in a Poe review. Griswold was also a critic as well as a writer of the first biography of Poe, titled Memoir of the Author, published the year after Poe died. The book was full of lies, fabrications, and forged letters.
Imagine what would happen if someone like Griswold had written a well-read obituary on Poe after his death.
Well, he did.
The New York Tribune published the obituary of Poe written by a man calling himself Ludwig 2 days after Poe's death. The obituary claimed Poe roamed the streets in drunken madness and mumbled to himself, among other things. Ludwig was eventually revealed to be Griswold, who seems to have taken his revenge for bad reviews with the obituary and the book he wrote about his former friend.
We hope you enjoyed this video on the great Edgar Allan Poe,
Don't forget to like and subscribe.
and we'll see you on the next one.